Go live, Amy, or you need a couple more seconds? Okay. Then we will go ahead and call this June 22nd budget workshop into order. It is my understanding that Commissioner Coleman is going to join us here in just a couple of minutes, but we'll go ahead and get started, catch him up when he gets here. First on the list is a motion to approve the agenda as it was published. I have no changes or amendments to the agenda. Do I hear a motion? I have a motion from Commissioner Martin, a second from Commissioner Farnsworth, with Commissioner Clark moving away from the dais. We still have a quorum, so we're going to keep on moving ahead. All those in favor of the motion on the floor? I'm sorry, any questions or comments on the motion on the floor from the dais? No. Any questions or comments on the motion on the floor from the public? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion passes unanimously with Commissioner Clark and Commissioner Coleman not at the dais. Is on the phone. So I think he's probably letting him in the back door right now. All right. Well, with that, Mike, you will move kind of slowly to reach for the mic, give Commissioner Coleman and Clark a chance to get back in here. Go ahead and take it away.
We could go through our day today. We came in at 7 this morning.
I was hoping you had a joke or two, you know.
A Gator fan, a Bulldog fan, and a Seminole fan walked into a bar. No. Come on, Rick.
Can they hear our microphones in the hall? I'm not sure that I've ever tested that. No? No. Okay.
Well, Mr. Mayor, this is...
why don't you tell us what we're here to meet about tonight?
This is an introductory workshop. It's the first of 4 planned workshops in our budget process with the City Commission. So tonight we're kind of doing an overview, a kickoff of the entire budget, the budget process, for the Commission, issues that we think we'll be facing as we go through the budget process. Our next workshop will be covering governmental funds, which I typically would refer to as general fund, but general fund is part of governmental funds. After that, we will cover our proprietary funds, which contain mostly our enterprise funds or our utilities, and then we will have a wrap-up meeting to cover them all. That's usually in the very tail end of August or in the beginning of September. Mr. Mayor, and then the Commission, so does ours, we'll have additional workshops to clarify any issues that come up during the other workshops. So, and Mr. Mayor, that transitions us into the budget timeline. The first thing I would mention to you is that for your staff, and we've been talking about it all along, budget starts in January. Our staff, primarily Dallas and department heads, began working on their budget request. It's kind of a systematic approach. We spend some time working on personnel issues, some time working on operational budget, and then our capital budget and extraordinary types of projects give us a chance to make sure we equally focus on all those very important components of our budget. So we do that through May. It's a very iterative process, extensive process, and then we get to June where we start conducting one-on-ones with the City Commission and public workshops to get feedback from the Commission on what they'd like to see in the budget and from the community in terms of level of service or changes or just things they'd like to see in this year's budget. Mr. Mayor, we have 3 documents for each elected official. The first is the presentation that we're working through. So it's a long presentation, but we'll go through it at a pretty good pace because we're in a workshop format and because we're really informal. We ask if you have a question, just raise your hand, stop us. We'll expound on issues. Dallas and I are going to tag team it. The second handout before you is something we've talked about with the Commission quite a bit, is the staffing plan. The staffing plan is the staffing equivalent of our CIP. Well, I guess our CIP goes 5 years. This goes 10 years. So we've met with department heads. We've met with their teams to talk about, as we grow, as our population increases, what do you see our staffing needs being for 10 years? We've done that in each operating area. We've rolled it up into this summary document here. You can see the detail for each operating area below. So we show that over a 10-year period of time, we would be growing from 66 FTEs to 91 FTEs The backup of this includes succession planning. What happens if we lose a key person? What do we think? How would we fill that position and not have such a big gap in terms of intellectual or institutional knowledge leaving the organization? So we're still in draft mode with that, but that's the staff's idea behind why we would put together a staffing plan. We've also just been kind of looking at what appropriate level of staffing is. I think if you're running an entity our size and providing the wide variety of services that we provide, there's not a real clear indicating of are you understaffed, overstaffed, those sorts of things. And like often in governmental operations, the best we can do is do a lot of peer evaluations. We look at cities that look like us. We benchmark. The Florida League of Cities keeps an amazing database of information. They're a wealth of information for us. So we've looked around and determined that that there are some per capita staffing per capita for cities our size. What we're seeing in our peer group is that's about 1 employee for every 80 people in a community. I can tell you that we're well above that, and we're not aspiring to get to that, but we think it's important for the commission to be aware of kind of what the rest of the world is doing in terms of providing levels of service at the government, at their government operation. Also mention, because especially for the past 5 years, we've added staff positions, 1 or 2 a year, or 1 to 1.5 a year. We're growing at about 300 people a year. And even if you take that outlier number of 1 staff person per 100 residents, a rule of thumb with us should be that means we're probably going to be needing to add 3 staff people a year just to maintain the same level of service. And again, I'm not suggesting that that's what our plan is. I just want, you know, if we came in and said, hey, the industry average is 50 people, we need to be adding 50 people a year, that would kind of be a frame of reference. A frame of reference is in local government, 1 person per 80 to 100 people, and with our growth rate, that means we probably 3 people a year is not unexpected. And that 1 person a year over a consistent period of time, if we did that for 5 to 10 years, we would be understaffed. And the reason I go into all the staffing issues is we are at the point now that we're stretching staff very thin to try to maintain the level of staff that we have, the level of service that we have. And so, yes, sir.
Mike, can you expound upon that? What entity needs to have?
Well, I think that I think every department we can point to. So I think right now, we'll get to that later tonight, but in utilities and really where our staffing needs are kind of between the supervisor and department head level, someone to take on some of the managerial tasks, professional services type things is a big need right now. You know, I've been coming to work looking at government employees, looking them in the eye for 35 years now, and you get a sense when you have to put in a short burst of 3 to 6 months where everybody's just got to put in the extra effort, and we all do, but things then kind of lull out and you get back to a normal sprinting pace instead of a breakneck pace. When I look in the eyes of some of our team right now, I know that people are on the verge, and that if we don't do something about it, it's going to result in people that ordinarily, they're high performers and ordinarily want to be here. They want to work somewhere. They're not looking to get out of work, or saying, I can go make this money for half the stress or less than half the stress, and I can put up with a lot of stress for 6 months or a year, but I can't just do it 8 consecutive years. And so those are some of the things that I'm seeing, and I think that, you know, we've demonstrated over time that we don't just knee-jerk react around here. If we have a suspicion that there's an issue, we go get data and we bring it to you to make decisions on you know, one, do you agree with us on this? Have we gotten the right data for you? But is it a direction we want to go? Because, you know, the commission always sets, this is the level of service that we want. And we always try to deliver probably a little higher level service than we have staff for. But I think, though, that, you know, we're at the point now that the level of service we've adopted, people seem to like based on the amount of feedback that we get, that folks like the level of service that the city government's providing them. And I think if we're going to continue that as we grow, we're going to have to staff up a little bit. And our presentation this week and in the next budget workshops, we will support that. I also will tell you that it's not our intention to say we got to staff up and then tell you that, well, that's going to result in a great big tax increase and great big utility rate increases. We understand that our residents there's a limit to what they're willing to pay, and we're not seeking to have our residents pay more for us to get to maintain a level of service and staff up. So we have our staffing plan. It's a draft. Last thing that's in your backup information is just 10-year population change, and this is something that I just really wanted to highlight for the commission to take a look at. In the last several months, there's been a lot of discussion at the county level, whether it's the county or whether it's the school board, that Newberry's growth rate is a problem for them, and Newberry and Western Alachua County's growth rate is a problem for them. And it got staff to thinking about that. Well, is that really true? And the problem with growth rates, especially when you're looking at percentages, is if you're growing at 300 people a year and your population is 6,000, that's a 5% growth rate, and Bill Conrad will tell you how absurd that is. But if you're 10 times our size, if you're 60,000 people, or Gainesville's 20 times our size, 120,000 people, they're growing they're adding a lot more people annually than we are. Their growth rate's still 2. And so it looks like that Gainesville's, at a very modest growth rate, and they're not the problem because they're well managing their growth. But at the end of the day, we need more schools and we need more roads, or Gainesville needs more schools and roads by a factor of 5.8 times in Newberry. Gainesville's added 5.8 times as many people in the last 10 years as Newberry has. Alachua County has added 4.5 times as many people as as Newberry has. And I just think it's important for our community and our elected officials to understand and have that type of data available when those suggestions are out there, because we all know we have a high growth rate, and without adequate information, we may accept that, we may tacitly accept that our growth rate is out of control and not well managed, or that we are part of the problem. And I think that data is disarming and pushes back. So I just wanted to tell you what those 3 documents are about, and then we'll jump right into the presentation. Moving along.
There's only 57 people in Waldo, and it says -57.
That's their 10-year growth rate, is minus 57 people. So budget timeline, you see this so very often during the budget process. So we're here in mid-June, or June the 22nd, with our first budget workshop. There's a whole list of things that are coming in July, August, and September. We'll get very active. The very next thing that you're going to see is that you'll be voting on a preliminary fire assessment rate. If you'll just remember, when that gets here, when you set the preliminary fire assessment rates, it is what is published in our truth and millage letter that goes out, and sometimes it gets people excited, but it's not saying this is what it's going to be. It's saying this is the maximum it can be. So per our fire assessment, the maximum it could be, without you guys changing everything, is $225. But it is currently set at $175, and staff will not ask the commission to set it at $225 unless you give us some kind of crazy direction coming out of this workshop right now.
Mike, and this question may be for Dallas, it's at 175 with that last 25 being to pay off the fire, it was either the fire station or the fire truck. And then we're supposed to go back down. How many years do we have till that debt is? Do you remember if it was the fire station or the fire truck? It was a specific thing that we had a big ticket item. I know we have another big ticket item for the fire department, but just so we're clear on.
Mr. Mayor, I believe it was originally for the fire station. When we paid that debt off due to some issues with our bank, we rolled that into the payment for the fire engine, which happened subsequent to that. The fire engine, I believe, has 8 more years of payments to be made.
Thank you.
So after we get through our budget timeline and process, then we go to budget guidelines and policies. These are policies that we have reduced the writing, but have been developed through feedback from our city commission or from our auditor or from best practices over a period of years. So these are the overarching principles that we develop our budget based on. We like to share them with the commission early on just for reminder purposes. We've established a policy, you've asked us to establish a policy of maintaining a minimum of 2.5 months operating reserves in our general fund. That changes, every year when we set a new budget, that bogey changes, but we need 1.54 million to comply with that policy. We currently have a shade right at 1.8 million, so we have some excess revenues. We also just remind the commission that we have a lot of projects that the commission has asked us to look into. We think that all revenues above that 1.5 million are on the table for consideration on those projects. The commission also asked us to only consider one-time revenues utilized for one-time expenses. So if we get a big payoff and we end up with ARPA money would be a great example. If we end up with a chunk of money that's a one-time gift and we're not going to get it recurring, might be best to spend it on a one-time expenditure, not creating a program that needs to be funded years and years moving. The budget shall be balanced, and that's a great policy to have in place. We're fortunate that we have a state statute that requires us to be there as well. We develop fair and equitable operating charges for our utilities. You'll see that when we get to our utility enterprise, our utility workshop, that we have very competitive rates. In the water and wastewater area, we're about the lowest in our peer group, and in electric, we're in the lower tiers. We're below 50% there. The commission has challenged us to diversify our revenues, and we've done a good job with that. There's still a couple areas that the commission would like to explore those, and that we should always try to budget based on maintaining a same level of service with kind of a flat budget, but adjusted for inflation, changes in population, those types of things. That's the type of budget that you've had us prepare the last several years. These are just kind of the regular bullet list of things that the commission will be asked to consider and give us feedback on as we go through the budget process. And you can see down towards the end, when we were putting this together, law enforcement issues was an issue and has been an issue for almost the 6 years since I've been here, 7 years since I've been here, but the commission put that to bed at our last meeting. So now we have a lot of certainty about what's going on with law enforcement. It's not really something the commission is probably going to be spending a lot of time considering, at least for the next 5 years.
Micah, do you have a slide where you just talk about revenue diversification later on, or do we need
Absolutely.
to talk about that now?
Absolutely.
Okay, continue
We
then.
sure do. Mr. Mayor, some population trends. We spoke about population a little bit earlier, but Newberry continues to see growth rates of about 5%. That's been sustained over a long period of time. We don't foresee that slowing unless something dramatically changes in the economy. So we're currently, as of last April, we were sitting right around 6,900 folks. We're a year later now. We're probably around 7,200 in population right now. Another look at population. This is a 30-year look backwards and a 30-year look forward. We prepared this projection when we were doing as part of our wastewater plant expansion. So thought it would just be another way of looking at population as a frame of reference for our elected officials. And then finally, as the table or the chart that I mentioned earlier that just shows the differential in growth rate, not growth rate, but in actual growth numbers over a 10-year period. And you can see, this is from lowest to highest, but that Alachua County and Gainesville, being the largest entities in the region, are definitely growing, adding to the population at a much higher rate, at least fourfold higher than the city of Newberry. And then when we move to revenues, I think Dallas is going to take over and go through this exciting part of our presentation.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Commissioners. To start with, we'll discuss our millage or our property taxes. Generally, when we have this kickoff meeting, the property appraiser hasn't certified the taxable values yet, but they actually did certify our taxable values yesterday. So these are our real numbers as far as we're aware. So the 2021 certified gross taxable value is just shy of $550 million, up 11.5% in taxable value from last year. That does result in a rollback rate of just shy of 5.6 mils from our current millage rate of 5.999. Staff is building the budget on a continuation property tax rate of the 5.999, so we're not proposing an increase or a decrease at this time. For the Commission's knowledge, at the bottom of that slide there is a chart which shows the impact of a millage rate increase or decrease, and the effect it'll have on the city's revenue and the effect it'll have on an average homeowner in the city. This year, our average taxable value of a home in Newberry is just over $100,000, which means that our average resident is paying $601.82 annually in city property taxes.
Save our home.
There's a whole nother slide about
Whole nother slide.
it. A whole nother slide about it. On this slide, which I attempted to put information on, but PowerPoint didn't agree with me. This slide shows the dollar distribution. So when people get their tax bill from the tax collector and they pay those tax dollars to the tax collector, there's oftentimes the thought that that entire tax bill is going to the city.
Hey, back a page. So if we kept the millage rate at the current 5.999 instead of going back to the rollback, let's just for argument's sake, I guess it's about a third, so it's about $33, right? Ish? Okay.
Yes, sir. I see what you're saying.
Okay. So we're talking about a $33 increase.
But it's not
Kind
an
of-
increase because you're keeping the tax rate the same to the resident. So the resident will see you'd see a $33 decrease if you lowered it.
Right.
If you keep it the same, it'll be a few dollar increase based off their
Yeah,
taxable
just
value.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
And I'll discuss a little bit how more that works when we get to Save Our Homes. So on the dollar distribution, for every dollar that a resident pays in property taxes to the tax collector, it's distributed to a variety of different governmental agencies in the area. About 33 cents goes to fund the county and county services, includes the sheriff and the constitutional officers. Just over 9 cents goes to the library district. 2 cents goes to the Children's Trust. Just shy of 30 cents goes to the school board. A penny and a half goes to the water management district, and about a quarter of that dollar actually comes to the city of Newberry in property taxes. So Save Our Homes. Save Our Homes is a constitutional amendment that took effect in 1995. And I'm going to do my best to give an overview of it, but Commissioner Coleman may be able to correct me if I veer off course here. The goal of Save Our Homes was to keep people in their homes and not be priced out of their homes with taxable value increases. The market we're seeing now is a really good example of property values, and residential property values are going up extremely rapidly. So without Save Our Homes, you would see your taxable values go up equally as rapidly and see large increases in your property taxes. So what Save Our Homes does is it limits the amount that your taxable value can increase each year to either the CPI or 3%, whichever is lower. So for this year, and for almost every year, the CPI has been lower. This year it's 1.4%. What that means is that if you live in a $150,000 house and your home's value has increased to $175,000, you're not going to be taxed on $175,000 next year. You'll only be taxed on that 1.4% increase. So it limits the amount of property taxes that you'll have to pay, and they defer that other amount often in the books. And there's an example at the bottom here of kind of how it works. The key part of it is that even though our taxable values have gone up in the city and that our the market price of homes has gone up, the taxable value of individual residents' homes can only go up 1.4%. So they're not going to see a huge increase in their taxes because, you know, their house on the real estate market may be worth way more. Stop, make sure nobody has any questions, or
How do we do?
make sense? Cool. So currently, the city has about $40 million, I'm sorry, just over $30 million in deferred taxable value, about $200,000 a year that the city doesn't realize in tax revenue. That means that the values of all the houses in the city are depressed by about $30 million because of Save Our Homes. This graph shows you a distribution of residential taxable property values within the city. I know a lot of times these graphs scare people because you see all the houses for sale in Newberry and they're $200,000 and $300,000, close to $400,000. But remember, we're talking about taxable value, not market value. This also includes homestead exemptions. So if you have a $200,000 house and it's only appraised by the property appraiser at $175,000, and then you have a $50,000 homestead exemption, your taxable value is $125,000, even though you could go sell it for $200,000. So the majority of our homes in Newberry are less than $100,000 in taxable value. However, over the last few years, we are seeing it shift a little higher, but by and large, the majority are under that $100,000 mark. Here's your taxable property values by year. Going back to 2009, you can see where in 2010 we had the Great Recession and took a dip in our values, and then 2014 and 15 were Argos. But ever since then, since 2016, we've had a very steady rise in our taxable values, which has been healthy for the city. Here's your millage rate comparison, just so the commission's aware of where we stand with our peers in the area. We're right about in the middle of the pack. This is based off the current year's millage rates, as well as converting fire assessment from a flat fee into a millage rate based fee. But as you can see, we're right in between Gainesville and High Springs and just below Alachua, Waldo. And then this is the same information but in graphical form. The key point here is to show how, while we're in the middle of the pack, there's not a lot of difference between us and, you know, Gainesville through Alachua, but Waldo, Hawthorne, and Archer are pretty significantly higher than we are, and the unincorporated county and Micanopy are not too far behind where we're sitting as well.
Dallas, I'm just going to stop you for 1 second because the last slide and this slide become really important for some of our new commissioners, especially. You'll hear residents say, well, in Waldo, it's this, or in some other city. And it is really difficult to compare cities apples to apples. Every city offers a different level of service. Every city gets their revenue from in different ways. I think the general rule of thumb is that the larger the city, the less they can charge for those services because it's distributed out among a greater number of folks. But these charts here, I think, are the fairest way to compare ourselves and how we're doing. And I think we give an exceptional level of service, perhaps higher than some of these other cities, while still maintaining right there in the middle of the pack in terms of cost. So, I would put these two slides, these sheets of paper somewhere in your desk so that as we go through this process and people start lobbying and you say, well, why are we charging for this when some other city doesn't? Well, I guarantee you that other city charges for a lot more on something else, right? It's just about how they go about getting their revenues. Go ahead, Dallas.
Absolutely. So speaking of revenue diversification and revenue options, these are the same two options we've discussed for a few years. The first one being a utility tax on water sales. State statute does provide the city commission with the authority to tax potable water within the city up to 10%. Most of our peers in the area and throughout the state do charge some water tax, either 5 or 10%. Currently, the city taxes electric sales, but not water sales. If the commission was interested in implementing this, each percent of tax that the city commission levied would generate about $8,700 a year in revenue to the general fund. One caveat on the utility tax is that if the commission decided today to implement it, we could not implement it until January of next year, based off of the way the Department of Revenue requires us to implement it. So your first year, you wouldn't realize a full year of the revenue, but you would after that. The second tool that is in your belt are special assessments. As the commission's aware, we currently do have a special assessment for fire protection. Special assessments are a source of revenue granted to the city through our home rule authority that allows us to assess property for certain benefits to that property, or to construct capital facilities and maintain those benefits. The City Commission authorized us in the current year's budget to look into a special assessment for street improvements and capital infrastructure related to streets. We do have a consultant from GSG working on that, who is expected to hopefully bring back to the commission in a couple of months, some options if the commission wanted to pursue that. Listed on the slide here are other options of special assessments that would be in the commission's tool belt.
Dallas, will that consultant provide the study before this budget cycle is over? I thought, if the commission chooses to do that, does that have to go to referendum?
No, sir.
Okay.
Special assessment can be adopted through the City Commission's authority. We're hoping that we can bring the street assessment back, the information on it. We've run into some quandaries, challenges, in that
Give me
what we
a
wanted.
for example of it. What's the quandary here?
Um,
We know which
because-
streets are ours, we know which streets are the counties, we know which streets are the states. That quandary took us 2 years to unpack, but we got that one. What's now?
Yes, so we do know that. The GSG has taken a lot of time to map those streets to their GIS system, which subsequently has helped our GIS system, because you have to show the benefit each property is going to receive. And so they first needed to know which streets were ours and which streets were the counties and the states. So we've been working on that. The other issue we're currently working on is because you have to show a nexus of benefit to the property owner, we've been having to work with Jamie in our Public Works Department to quantify the amount of maintenance we're putting in on each road. And then, to add another level of it, there is a service level difference between those residents who live in the downtown urban area versus those residents who live in the rural areas, particularly with like stormwater and street lights and right-of-way maintenance. So we're working to develop districts that say if you live, for example, in the downtown area and you're receiving a higher level of benefit because you have street lights and more often mowed lawn, mowed right away, the assessment is X, but if you live in the rural areas, it's a third of X or half of X.
How many districts can we have?
You can have as many districts as you want. Another part of the task that we have asked GSG to do, and we've spoken with the commission about before, is those residents who live on unpaved roads that wish to see their roads paved, is establishing the ordinance and the process to go through to establish a district around that road that says, the 15 residents who live on this unpaved road agree to be in a special district and pay an assessment for that paving of that particular road. So they're working on those individual district processes as well as a citywide process.
So, I mean, the downtown rural districts, those make, the most obvious sense right off the bat. Is it possible to have a maintenance district and an improvement district? I mean, I understand, the problem with the special districts that get down to one road is now you're talking about 15 people sharing the cost of $1 million improvement, and that gets unpalatable for those 15 people. And part of the quandary when it comes to roads is that we all benefit from roads, whether we ever actually drive on those roads or not. So I think that's the quandary that this company is saying, that that's not actually true.
I
You have to
I
show
don't
a
necessarily think
tangible
it's
benefit?
the company is saying it's true, but the courts have said it's untrue. You have to be able to use a special assessment. You have
You
to
have
show
to.
that there is a benefit to the property. And where we struggle is if I live on Southwest 50th Street
Right.
and I am paying capital assessment to build a road on Northwest 50th Street, am I actually receiving a benefit from that? And part of the reason we've been delayed is because that was our original intent, is we wanted to adopt a capital facilities road assessment. You know, your fire assessment that you adopt can be used to build capital facilities. The courts have ruled that you really need to be able to show some sort of direct connection. So that's why we've pivoted from a capital improvement assessment to a maintenance assessment, with the thought process of, if we can adopt a maintenance assessment, the dollars that we're currently spending out of general fund ad valorem taxes for maintenance can then go into capital
Okay.
and to build those roads.
So, doesn't sound to me like we have much of a shot at getting this done before this budget cycle is over, because those are some pretty big, complex questions to answer. Is it possible, we've never done this, is it possible, let's say we just missed the mark, but we know what it should be in December. Is it possible to adopt something like that in the middle of a budget cycle year?
Mr. Mayor, you can adopt.
I hate to waste a whole year, you know.
Yes, and also no. Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor, you can adopt a special assessment at any time, provided you go through the legally required process. The sticking point would be your collection method.
Yeah.
So for your fire assessment, we use what's called the uniform method of collection, which means we ask the tax collector to put it on the tax bill. To get it onto the tax bill, there is a process we have to follow. We have to give certain authority to the tax collector and notice. And also, taxes are only ever due once a year. Mm-hmm. So if you miss that window and don't get it onto, this year's November tax bill, we wouldn't get it on until next November. However, you don't have to use the tax bill as a method of collection. It is the easiest for the city, and it provides the highest level of return, because most people are going to pay their taxes. But the city commission could just directly bill residents or put it on the utility bill or something like that.
Okay.
The issue with that is obviously our utility area does not reach all of the city.
Okay. Okay, we have this slide every year, and every year we kind of go through it pretty quick. So I'm going to ask Mike, let's talk about the utility tax, and give me no elected official ever wants to argue in favor of tax. Give me a 30-second pitch for why, and I don't in any way think this board is going to adopt a 10%, but generally we do things in increments. What's the benefit? What would be the argument and the reason why this board should adopt a 2% water sales tax?
Second word of the title.
Mr. Mayor, the reason that Newberry should consider adopting a utility tax is the slide where we were just looking at what our tax rates are compared to everyone else's peer comparison. And everyone else is charging a utility tax. It does diversify their revenue, so that and most everyone else is charging that 10% comparison. So when you look at our tax rate, our millage rate, you could almost put an asterisk on there and say, we're charging 5.99, but we don't have a utility tax, and the rest of these suckers do if they have a water system. So it helps out in peer comparison, and it diversifies our revenue stream. The commission could take the position that for every dollar we get out of the utility tax, we're going to do a rollback on our millage rate, because we're not trying to get more revenue, we're trying to get more diversified revenue and have a more favorable position when we compare ourselves to our peers. The reason that the commission has in the past resisted that is in Newberry, Florida, unlike a lot of other cities that may have a water utility tax, there's a clear differential of 2,100 homes that are on the water system that are also happen to be on our electric system, and about 600 homes that are not connected to our water system. So now you're putting more of a burden on the folks that use the water utility than dividing it across the 100% of the residents in the city that take benefit from the general fund, because a utility tax, even though it's connected to your utility consumption, is a general fund revenue. It is not a utility revenue. It's a transfer from the utilities straight into the general fund. So that's the 3-minute overview of why you would or would not consider a utility tax.
How onerous would it be for us to earmark that money so that only the people who are paying for the water system are getting the benefit of paying the tax?
I think that because we can calculate it, that we could always have assurances that general fund revenue or general fund expenditures in a certain region of town exceed those in other regions of town by an incremental cost, and we could say that is because these folks pay into the utility tax. We could make the same comparison of the electric. We
Right. That's
we
what I'm
already get a
thinking.
utility
Right.
tax on that, but I also think that if you look at our budget, that by and large, more of the city's revenues are spent in our more urbanized areas than our rural areas.
Well, you know, I don't get Newberry water, but when my water goes off, I also don't have anyone who goes to work to put it back on. I go out in the field and try not to electrocute myself, you know, at the pump. You know, I can tell who's had to do that here. Yeah. So you know, what I would like, because I think that every year we talk about this, and every year it's so abstract that we just kind of gloss over it. So I think what would help me is if we actually saw what the effect of this would be in terms of diversification, how we could make sure that the money that our water rate payers are paying is really just benefiting them, not benefiting the folks out, you know, on their own wells. And maybe at one of our next
The very
budget
next
workshops, you guys could show us, this is what it, I mean, I get, you know, 87 for each percentage. Where would that money go? What's the impact here? I mean, these are relatively low dollars. However, you know, that's the whole point of diversification, is if we get a little bit here and a little bit there and a little bit there, you know, we don't have to get a big chunk from any place. And we've been able to figure out, you know, for years I paid for mosquito control, even though I never got that service out in rural Newberry. And we were able to figure out a way to get mosquito control for urban downtown, where only urban downtown paid for it. And that seems to work, and people seem to really like that. And it's fairer to people who live out in rural Newberry. So if we could see
Absolutely.
some impact here and some scenarios that you guys could show us, so we could have a better conversation other than just, well, we could make this money, but we don't quite know, you know, what the offsets would be.
Yep.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I think it's important to this conversation, and it should probably be on this slide, but our average residential water bill per month is just shy of $25. So if you implemented a 10% tax, you'd be impacting those customers by $2.50 a month.
Okay.
Good point.
Commissioner Farnsworth?
So using the mayor's philosophy, if we build a sewer system between here and Archer or between here and Gainesville, are the people that are going to benefit from that sewer system going to be the only ones paying for it?
Yep, Mr. Mayor, when for utility services, those that are connected pay the bills. Our non-utility customers do not support our utility enterprises. So, according to what you just stated, the mayor is correct. Just the wastewater customers support the wastewater system.
So if a new one's built, only the people that are going to benefit from that system are going to be paying for it.
If they're not connected, then that would be our general approach to the accounting. If we had an independent utility system, we could account for them independently. That's kind of a commission decision. If you run two water systems, you could say Mike and Dallas blend it. We don't want to have two billing districts, so just blend the cost. Or you could say, no, absolutely not. We want them separated, and we would have separate billing for each utility system that we're operating.
So we built one between here and Archer, Commissioner Coleman and Mark would have to pay for it. So
If they connected,
I'm off with that.
yeah.
And I think just, you know, a thought about utilities, and this isn't exactly where you're going, but In order to make utilities affordable, you have to have density, which is why utilities aren't in unurbanized area. If we can't get 4 homes per acre in a neighborhood, the cost to install the utilities, you can never pay it off. And so that's why our land development code speaks to the density that requires connection to water and sewer. And if you're not going to connect to water and sewer, you'll be at a much lower density, because the thought is the environment can handle, a well and a septic tank load for 1 home every 5 acres. Could never handle that where you have densities of 4 homes per acre.
Okay. I don't want to try to put anybody on the spot about any of these tonight. I think tonight we just need to be thinking about this. But at some point in time, at one of these upcoming meetings, if anyone wants to go on the record and say, I think we really need to pursue one of these, then we can do that. But we have committed to a sincere conversation about the streets and street improvement one. But it sounds like we're hitting some stumbling blocks on getting that data in front of us. Are there anything else up here that we want to tell staff? We really want to think about one of these other special assessments. Remember, philosophically, I'm a big proponent of special assessments. When you do things in millage rates, as we've recently been discussing in Alachua County, we can say that money is to pay for anything we want to, and then a new board or we can change our minds and say, we're not going to do that with it. When it's special assessments, you have to do what you say you're going to do with it. It's done. The problem with special assessments is everybody pays equal, right? And so a lot of folks argue that is a regressive taxation, right? Because everybody's paying the same thing. So we've generally kind of split the baby when it comes to special assessments. We do part of it through special assessments and part of it through millage rates to try to adhere to both sides of that argument. But I think the street improvement ones, we need to pursue that and figure out. I'm not saying we need to vote for it because we don't know what the numbers are, but that I think we need to get more information back. Dallas?
Mr. Mayor, just a clarification. Our fire assessment, the commission has decided that everybody pays the same amount and that is generally how most fire assessments work. With some of these other assessments, the commission does have a variety of different ways to determine the assessment.
Like the streets and roads. We're going to have a downtown district.
And some cities do it by linear foot of road frontage. Some do it by distance to and from your. So when we bring back the streets and roads information, we will provide the variety of different ways the commission could choose to assess property owners.
Mr. Mayor, this ain't got nothing to do though with the roads that we've already budgeted or talked about doing the 1.1
Correct.
billion on. That ain't nothing to do with that.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
This is larger.
This is the other.
This is getting some systemic plan in place that then we don't ever have to think about it anymore. We say, this is the plan, this is what we're funding it, you guys go make it happen. So this is to the graded roads, the dirt roads, the paved roads that need resurfacing, those kind of. This board said to our staff, we want to have the best roads in Alachua County.
So is this where the dump truck come in that we talked about?
This is where the dump truck would come in, that conversation. Now we have, at our next one, we'll talk about governmental, so we have a deeper dive into that conversation then.
Okay.
But these would be ways that you could use to fund those kinds of things. In my mind, the CRA is the downtown redevelopment. That's, we should wait and let that play out before we talk about a downtown redevelopment, because that's clearly what that is supposed to do. Any of these other diversification schemes, we want to say, staff, go explore, come back and give us a presentation just on. Commissioner Martin, is that a slide forward to the mic or just a repositioning? Okay. If I'm not hearing anything, then Dallas, proceed, or are we back to Mike?
Just before we jump off this slide, I would just say that.
Before we jump off this slide, I would just comment that the water wastewater extension / improvements bullet points are probably tools that we're going to speak more with you about as we move into the fall. Won't necessarily impact this budget, but may be the tool that we use to move some infrastructure projects forward that are on staff's list of things that we need to be thinking about in the next year or two. And Mr. Mayor, I'd also just point out that stormwater utilities, and I'm not suggesting that the commission has an appetite for it, but I just would say that those are kind of easy to divvy up between those who benefit and those who don't, in terms of, you know, we maintain 35 or 40 retention basins. We've been fencing a lot of them because we have sinkhole activity. We have to mow them because they're near HOAs and folks want them mowed. And I've been part of developing, stormwater utilities or stormwater taxes that generate revenue sufficient to cover the cost for those activities, much like our mosquito control districts do now. The people that pay are the people that live in areas that benefit from common stormwater basins. And, at least in the last utility I set up was if you lived in a community that had publicly maintained stormwater basins, you paid a fee. I think it was $6. It may have been $6 a year, or may have been $6 a month. I'd have to do a little research. And if you lived in a neighborhood that had privately maintained basins by your HOA, the corresponding cost was half that, because the city just has basins that benefit the general public, no matter whether you live in a subdivision with privately maintained basins or not. And so there was a developing of a scheme, but none of it was particularly onerous on residents, and all that money was earmarked for stormwater. So again, not necessarily advocating, but just providing an example of how I've seen these revenue diversification concepts play out.
And Mike, I'm going to pause 1 second because we do have a member of the public here, and we're kind of roughly halfway through. So anybody want to make any public comment about anything you've heard so far tonight, or just want to listen?
Some of the things you said are encouraging. I live down 266.
If you want to make a comment, I need you to come to the mic to make it, though. Sorry to put a stipulation on there. And will you give us your name again, sir?
Kevin Starr. I'm here to show my face again. I live down 266, which turns into 282nd, which then turns into 32nd. But anyway, Holder grade. I submitted pictures to the website or wherever, the email of the current state of that road. I've heard all the talk and fancy jargon, all these pretty numbers, but what I see is what I see with my eyes. And I see other roads being done. I don't see why ours hasn't. It's a 5-mile stretch. I see a big pile of millings sitting outside town, just sitting there. I see annexation, and when was annexation of Newberry, where we took in all that land, all these extra people? And I'm seeing numbers that were not even 2,000 in 10 years. I see all these new homes, all these new developments, a fancy RV park, a retirement center. So we have, in my opinion, money. And yes, all these new people are nice, and I see how busy the street is. But what about taking care of some of the people who've been here forever? And that road is bad. There's a mini watermelon pond out there right now. And my truck, it's a little Toyota. I have another truck, it's bigger, but about drowned out in it. So I'm here to show my face. I like what you're saying. I like these assessments, but an easy assessment would be for everybody to load in a van or something and drive down that road. Not after it's been paved, but right now.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate you.
Can I say something?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Why don't you just make a statement, though? We don't-
Okay. So the millings are not ours. The millings are already bought by a individual from the state of Florida when they did the grading. So to make that, just for information, that's not ours. So that's just one thing. I know it's a small thing, but just so you know.
Right.
That's not our stuff.
But I see
That's a
it.
state of Florida DOT. But anyway, and I hear you. And, I just want to clarify that so you know that we don't have all of that.
Well, I just threw it out as something
I
that
know,
I
I know.
see, and you know, as a resident,
That's
I
right.
see things, and
That's
all these
right.
fancy numbers and things. They're nice,
I got
but you know, we focus on things that you see, tangible things.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate you being here and staying on top of it. Commissioner Martin?
We did get Mr. Tharp's pictures, and they did also go to the city manager and the utility director, so thank you.
They come out every 3 weeks, but they don't, it might be twice that.
I'm just acknowledging that we got your pictures, and they have them also to try to get that addressed for you.
Okay.
And by our calculation, we've had 6 inches of rain in the last 30 hours.
Yeah.
We desperately needed it.
Yeah.
It's an unusual event to have 6 inches of rain over a 24-hour period in Newberry, Florida. So maybe once a year we have an event like that.
Okay. Any other questions or comments before we move on to expenses?
Mr. Mayor, we'll jump into expenses. Same thing. If you have questions, feel free to jump in. We'll characterize expenses as personnel, operational expenses, or capital and extraordinary expense. I think we have a new category to talk about this year that has to do with some COVID relief funding. We'll start with personnel. Every year we see increases to pay for employee retirement benefits. Those benefits are expected to be minimal this year, or those increases are expected to be minimal this year. We're not seeing anything from the state that leads us to believe that this is going to be a significant cost for us. Health insurance increases, on a good year, that's 8%. Some years it's 10 and 12%. My guess is that we're going to start somewhere around 15% and then start negotiating. And hopefully we'll call it a victory if we get it below 10%. None of the other costs, I shouldn't say none. As a general rule, any of our expense categories, if they average more than 3%, we're not going to be able to keep up. We're going to have to increase tax rates. So when we see health insurance increases, and this has been at least the last 5 years, but probably the last decade, increasing at that pace, and it's not unique to the city of Newberry. It is the healthcare industry. All of the general public is feeling this if they're getting health insurance. But that's always a challenge for us, is that those costs exceed the rate of revenue increases in the city. Compensation for employees, we discuss this every year. We discuss merit versus COLA. Our research suggests that, and we have always been merit only, no COLA increases. Our research suggests that we'd like to have a conversation about coming up with some sort of a mix of those, that we're not advancing employees through a pay grade. They're kind of staying. When they start entry level, they get a merit increase, but they're not really having that opportunity. Inflation is catching up with them faster than their pay grade is advancing, and so we're not seeing people into the mid and upper ends of our pay grades that a healthy employee person or pay plan would demonstrate. So we want to have more conversations about that. We're going to ask to the commission to fund a study this year, a compensation study. Like other things, like we recommend an annual audit. Well, we do more than recommend it. We're compelled to do it. The state recommends it in a state statute, but we do visioning every 10 years. We do a charter review every 10 years. Responsible entities do compensation studies periodically, and we're coming up to that point that staff is going to recommend one. Those studies are generally about $15,000, so this definitely fits into the category of an extraordinary expense. It'll be on the list that the commission will have to prioritize when they say, okay, here's our excess revenues. After we do a continuation budget, let's talk about the things we want to see. Let's prioritize them and see where we land.
Mike, have we ever done that kind of study before?
To my knowledge, the city of Newberry's never participated in a compensation study.
Now, we did a study 4 or 5 years ago about whether we were in the right range for some of our salaries.
We've
What
done
was the
some-
difference between that, what we did there, and what you're not suggesting, but discussing right now?
We've done some peer comparisons where we just simply get with our neighboring communities and see what they're paying. And if they've had those studies, and fortunately some of our neighbors have had those studies, it helps us out, but not nearly so comprehensive as things like internal parity, where you have a guy that works in public works with a job title of maintenance worker, and a guy in a completely different field with a similar job title, but what they mean in terms of daily activity are completely different. And what is the parity there? You know, we have an ongoing conversation about what our line workers make compared to market, our utility line workers. And so a compensation study will compare us to our peers. They will also do an external review of each of our job classes, but we'll do an internal parity review too, and then come back with recommendations to the City Commission that here are the ranges we found. I'd say normally they find 15 to 20 peers. They'll say ranges, and they'll come back with recommendations that if your midpoint is more than 10% plus or minus from the midpoint of your peers, that's something you need to make an adjustment on. If you're within a few percentages, you're doing okay. And they'll do it for each rate class. So it's just significantly more comprehensive. We have a sample rolling around here that we've been showing at some of our one-on-ones. I think I forgot it for Commissioner Coleman's one-on-one, but bring you out to give you an idea of the type of feedback you get. It's just more comprehensive than our staff typically would do, or that we just don't have that many staff people available to be doing that type of internal evaluation.
Okay, Commissioner Clark?
Mr. Mayor, I was just gonna say, which director is 15,000, we do a lot of studies. We do a lot of studies throughout the year, and, I mean, if, we know our line workers or water guys or fire department or whoever's making less, we take 15,000 and add it to the cost increase of helping somebody instead of giving it to somebody to give us a calculation. That's just what I don't mind.
Understood.
But,
Well, and from my perspective, we're advocating for it. We haven't got the list finalized to say how far up the totem pole it gets. We appreciate that the commission would consider it, hear the pros and cons of doing it, and we'll see where it goes from there.
All right, thank you, Mike.
And Mr. Mayor, we're going to spend some time speaking with the commission about the minimum wage amendment. As you recall, last November, the voters of the state of Florida voted to move minimum wage over a 5-year period from $10 an hour up to $15 an hour. Was it 10? It was $8.20 up to $15 an hour. Now, we have a head start on that. I think our lowest wage today is $10.78 in that neighborhood, and we've been working that way for some time at the Commission of the Direction, at least 4 years. And we've always focused on our lower pay ranges to make sure that they're adequate to sustain our employees. So, you know, and the commission tells us, and we know it to be true, our human assets are our most valuable assets. But we have developed, when you go from a $10 an hour minimum wage to a $15 an hour minimum wage, a big concern is that ripple effect of compression. I was doing some math today over. If someone starts for the city in a entry-level position, one of our field workers, if they started 15 years ago or 10 years ago at $8 an hour, and then they managed through COLA and through merit increases to get a 5% increase a year, and I tell you that over the last decade, no one has averaged 5% increase a year working in anywhere in government for the same entity. After 15 years, they'd make their way all the way to $16 an hour, and they would feel like, you know, that they're rock stars because they've gotten experience, they have 15 years experience, they have a lot of training under their belt, and they must have been getting the best evaluations you could get to get 5% annually. And then they're going to look across the way at an entry-level position that is now being paid $15 an hour, no experience, just walked in, and that guy's going to be a rock star, but there's no way you can compare the value that they're bringing to the city for someone that's making almost the same wages. So that creates what's known as compression. It makes minimum wage more challenging. You can't just simply raise the lowest pay grades, because you end up with all these people in the middle that should be making more based upon their relative value to the organization that has to be adjusted. So we have developed what I consider as strong a plan as you can for how to address that at minimal expense to the taxpayers. And it's a step-in plan. We transmitted a memo to the commission on it day before yesterday, I believe. And we take the folks closest to $15 an hour, and they make more sizable movements. And then the further away you get from that minimum wage, we adjust them a little bit less until the upper pay grades may not see much of a change at all. But we're trying to eliminate this compression issue that could be created by the amendment. It's very complex, but we have 5 years to roll it out. So we'll spend some time throughout our budget processes talking about that as well. Mr. Mayor, I've indicated earlier that we've developed a long-term staffing plan to deal with population increases. We've been benchmarking our peers. Again, this is kind of a poor man's way of doing evaluations, but we've gotten with our peer communities. I think there's probably 6 or 8 on the list to determine, what their staffing levels are versus their populations and the levels of service that they're provided. As we spoke about earlier, for tax rates, no two cities are exactly alike. You got to take it all with a grain of salt. You can look at us in High Springs, almost the same population. They offer police and fire and no electric, and we offer electric and no police. And Alachua has police but no fire, and they have electric as well as we do, but they have a whole bunch more customers than we do, bigger service territory. So, but we have a peer group of people that are relatively in the same place as us, and we're able to determine, okay, for the same level of service or similar levels of service, what are their staffing levels? And we've developed this 10-year plan for this year. As I mentioned, with our population growth, we think that just to keep up, we would add 3 staff positions a year. I can tell you over the last 5 years, we've been averaging 3/4 of a people a year. So I think we've added 4 full-time staff persons over the last 5 years. And given our growth, you could make the suggestion that it should have been 12. So we are lean. We intend to stay lean, but this year we're recommending the addition of a planner. And I think someone asked, where do we need it the most? We kind of need a little bit of everywhere. And you guys are all up here. You've seen how many planning processes we brought to you. You also hear the strain. We can't get some of these applications reviewed fast enough. People say it took a little longer than they anticipated. We just are short-staffed in our planning department, and we are ready for the addition of a planner, and we are recommending that. We're looking for some assistance in the utility area, especially in that leadership area. We seem to have enough warm bodies to do the work, but managing projects and overseeing crews is an area that we're struggling. So as part of our plan for succession, we've talked with the commission. This will be our 3rd year talking about an assistant utility director or a project manager. We tried a project manager, and it wasn't our best fit, and we kind of backed away from that. And this year we anticipate asking for an assistant utility and public works director, but I just have to candidly say that we're still having a few conversations about whether project manager may be a better fit for this year. We need to add one in the water wastewater area. That's really kind of a planning thing. We are, as you know, we're planning for a wastewater treatment plant expansion. We've got a new permit that's in the works. It should have been issued, but what was transmitted to us as this is your final permit was just onerous to the point that it would significantly change our utility rates. We were going from plant operations of 1 operator for 2 hours a day to 24/7 operations. That will require us to add maybe 5, maybe 6 new water wastewater operators just to keep up with the treatment plant. So we are negotiating with DEP feverishly, trying to back off on that. DEP is the permit issuer. But we know that with a new treatment plant, with expanded capacity, it's a more sophisticated treatment. We've been telling you that nutrient removal is an option that is better for the environment, but it's not a have-to. And up until this permit was issued, we were right in telling you that. This permit says that nutrient removal is a have-to. So we have 5 years before we're required to remove nutrients, nitrogen and phosphorus from our wastewater stream. So that new treatment plant that we were kind of zeroing in on because we thought that it was environmentally the right thing to do for the springs. We were going the right direction, but it's not an aspiration anymore. It's going to be a mandate. We have a similar mandate for biosolids. Right now the permit says our biosolids loading will be at a level that will be out of compliance at the end of year 1. And so we're negotiating that. We're trying to get a time extension because it seems foolish to spend a lot of money shifting gears on biosolids disposal when we know we're going to have a new treatment plant in 5 years and we'll have it all addressed. So, this wastewater operator is kind of a step in to a 5-year program where we'll be adequately staffed to operate the new treatment facility that is being mandated upon us. And we are proposing some administrative support. It's ultimately a half full-time equivalent that will support both our city clerk's operational area and our finance area. So those are the issues that we'll be discussing through the budget process with the commission. We'll address them in one-on-ones, and eventually you'll see them showing up in our proposed budget documents. Any question?
The only thing, and this is more for the public watching at home, there's been a lot of headlines lately about Newberry's effort to lead the way in a regional treatment facility, and I think that is an incredible idea. And I think it would be to every city's benefit to participate in that.
Absolutely.
But just as a reminder, Newberry has to upgrade our facility regardless. So a lot of these issues that we're going to be talking about are not necessarily wedded to the regional. They're going to be issues regardless of the regional or not, because Newberry's growth rate is dictating that we do these upgrades as well. So they're linked, but they're not completely wedded. So I just want to make sure we're clear on that point.
And that's a great point, Mr. Mayor. Just point out that not only are we facing these challenges, we just happen to be first, but all of the neighbors that we're having discussions with about these challenges are going to face them within the next 5 years. They're going to see the same mandates, and regional, for me, is moving from that's a really good idea because it could save us all some money. It could benefit our ratepayers to, it's almost a mandate that if we don't do it, none of our ratepayers are going to be able to afford wastewater treatment. And so I think we have a meeting next week with our partners to talk about it. We're going to share, here's our permit. Yours will look very similar to ours. They don't give special permits just for Newberry. So yours is going to look like ours the next time it's up for renewal. What is your plan to meet these? Can you guys afford, the treatment cost doubling so you can comply with that? And we do believe there are safety in numbers and that there are economies of scale and that regional treatment is going to prove itself to be the best way that we can all control our escalating costs for wastewater treatment.
Commissioner Martin.
Mike, if the treatment level that we are looking at is on the forefront, does that put us in a better commercially viable option for businesses looking to expand versus going to some of these other cities that are basically at a bottleneck with their systems?
It does in two ways. One, there are those companies that are simply looking for forward-thinking municipalities. They want to be green. So when they come to us and we tell them that part of our we get a megawatt of power through solar, they like that. When they tell them that part of our energy comes from nuclear power and the rest is coming from natural gas fired, we're a very green community, and they want to be associated with that. The same is going to happen with wastewater, that communities that promote conservation and water and that treat their wastewater to the highest standards and get beneficial reuse out of their wastewater and their biosolids, that companies want to do that. The other side of that coin is that communities that aren't adhering to these standards are going to end up in consent orders where they're just not allowed to bring on new customers. So that is a big concern of ours, is that we know the direction we're headed, but we know it's a 5-year process. We don't want the state to mandate that we have to achieve levels that we can't the state's also mandating the 5-year process. So we're saying, hey, we've got a plan. As long as we stick to the plan, don't put us in a mode of you can't connect new customers, because those new customers are who pays for plant expansions. You all know that our rate base, our current customers don't pay for additional capacity. We're not connecting new people. We're not going to have the revenues to add capacity to treatment plant. So two sides to that story, but it's the only way to grow into the future, is with the levels of treatment that you guys have asked us to focus on for our wastewater plant expansion.
Is it feasible at all for us to be able to do some of that stuff with or without some of the other partnerships in the neighboring cities?
Correct.
And
Absolutely.
okay,
We are not dependent on anyone else. It just, there are safety in numbers, and there will be economies of scales.
okay. I'm just, I guess I'm wondering if there's a pathway to put us in a position to take advantage of either the commercial viability of it, not only to retail customers, but the viability of, if these other cities are not wanting to connect right away, but they're going to be mandated, does that put us in a position to benefit from that, where we can spread those costs off to them? Whereas, if they got in now, it's $5 million, but if they wait, it's going to be $8 million, because we're going to charge you more because we took the risk and gamble ahead of time.
I think there'll be some of that. I think more of that's going to come from the regulation people, the people that regulate and permit us. DEP, in a recent telephone call from them, we suggested that the pipelines interconnecting the communities really ought to be the cost of DEPs, to incentivize us to do that. And DEP says, you're right, we agree with you on that. That tells me that, millions of dollars worth of pipelines, Newberry, High Springs, Trenton, or Archer doesn't have to pay for to incentivize this to happen. If you're one of those communities and says, no, we're out, we're not going to take advantage of that, I wouldn't necessarily expect the offer to remain unlimited. 10 years from now, you can come back and say, yeah, we're ready to do it now. I think that the regulatory community are expecting people to act.
The pipes running from city to city, are they dedicated from one city to the other, or does it constitute a more encouraging, can people connect along the way? And I'm thinking as far as a planning, organizing standpoint.
People could connect along the ways, and that's an issue that the county is watching. They are concerned about how that might happen. I have a very clear thought about how the county's interest could be preserved and who connects, but absolutely the pipelines could be tapped into and utilized. Furthermore, that there's a presumption that there's one treatment plant, one regional treatment plant, and that sewage flows one way. In my mind, if you have 4 communities, that you potentially have 3 of those communities already have treatment plants. There's potential that with a minor modification, another community has a treatment plant that will reach the same levels, and sewage flows a different way than it was originally thought to flow. So I think it opens up, it diversifies our opportunities for treatment. It gives us more resources for treatment, and I don't presume that these pipelines will be dedicated and will only flow one direction.
Okay, thanks.
I think to add to some of what Commissioner Martin is alluding to or asking, I think it also is going to come into grants, because if you've got all of these cities asking for all of these grants and they could connect and work on this regional, I think Tallahassee is going to start to say, go do that. This is what makes sense. This is the wave of the future. So we're not going to hand out, $5 million grants to all of you when you should be working together and collectively saving everyone tons of money.
Right.
So, yeah, I think all of those things are, my view, which is nowhere near as on the ground as Mike's is that Tallahassee is extremely excited about this concept, and we're working together, and there's going to be an increasing amount of pressure for not just us to be successful, but for other communities in the area to start to do the same thing.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
Thank you, Dallas.
Is Dallas taking over now?
No, he's advancing the slide. So, Mr. Mayor, second area that we focus on under expenses is our operating expenses. And I hear you say often to newly elected officials is, hey guys, at the end of the day, some 90% of our revenues are committed to our ongoing operations. So that 10% is what's discretionary, and that's what we're deciding over. And you're correct when you say that. We have, from past commission direction, provided for in this particular budget year and next year, we're not proposing service level increases. I think COVID was, for the year we're currently coming out of, COVID was the big asterisk. It resulted in a lot of savings in some ways. We have a lot of savings from our correctional inmates that aren't, the 20 correctional inmates that are not working in Newberry 5 days a week, providing the services they did, and that resulted in a pretty good savings, but they resulted in additional expenses in other areas. Well, the contract help that we hired to try to bridge the gap on a per unit basis was significantly more expensive. But we are proposing continuation level of service. We offer fire protection, we offer police protection, building services and those things, and that's what we're continuing to offer. The areas that we ask for increased levels of services, not more services, is just being better at the services that we already offer. And just reminding the commission, we haven't really been asked to add service levels, add new lines of service to the community for several years now. Again, the commission's ask is that we be the best at whatever we do, but we haven't added on something new. We are experiencing increased pricing on goods and service. Fuel prices are about double what they were a year ago, and fuel prices control just about every other commodity that we purchase because it's all transported to us by fuel. Mr. Mayor, we're seeing the same delivery time issues that you hear about in the marketplace. I hear the builders telling us about how tough it is to get things. We have transformers that are normally 8 and 12 weeks out that are now 36 weeks out. So we're trying to be patient as we can, and we're trying to communicate to people as well as we can. But we're not buying a lot of lumber, but the cost of copper and metals is going up. We're seeing significant inflation in cost that we're not quite sure whether they're temporary in nature or whether they're going to be more permanent. But what we're hearing from the industry is that the inflation rate is 3+, working on 4, and we haven't seen that in about a decade. The inflation rate for the last decade has been in the 1.5 range, and it hasn't put as much pressure on us as a 3% or 4% or 5% inflation rate. So that's what we're combating. We try to do, when we do a continuation budget, we do some price indexing. So you may see last year's budget for the same level of services being 2% less than this year's proposed budget. That's simply because the fuel went up X number of percent, and the things that we can price index, we do. We also make consideration for population increases. Those are areas like recreation, where we know our recreational fees. More kids are going to play football this year than last year, but we also know we're going to have to buy more uniforms this year, and so you'll see a corresponding increase in revenues and expenses associated with population increases. Mr. Mayor, that concludes operations, and now we'll talk about capital improvement program. And we also just kind of throw in there extraordinary expenses. Normally, when we're just talking, capital expenses mean anything that's kind of extraordinary and costs more than $5,000. But truly, when you jump into the nuances, well, some of those aren't truly capital expenses. They're just extraordinary O&M expenses. We focus on both renewal and replacement of existing infrastructure as a priority over expansion. We think that our municipality's obligation to our existing infrastructure is greater. People, they turn assets over to us in a new subdivision. They turn over water mains and sewer mains and roads, paved roads and sidewalks, and they expect us to keep them that way. And so this part of the category is where we focus on that. So, you know, under the category of renewal and replacement for existing infrastructure, we have State Road 26 project. That Twin Pairs project will result in cost for all of our utility systems because we have utility infrastructure in those right-of-ways. If the state's going to come through and tear them up, I can assure you it'll be about a third of the cost if we address it at that time than if we wait until the nice new highway's down and then we decide to do something about it. We expect there will be price participation from the state on each of those utility modifications, but we're just not quite sure to what level. We have asked DOT to let's start working on that. Let's get our pencils out and figure out exactly how much they think the city's going to be required to pony up and how much that DOT will be compensating the city for things like underground and the electric utility and making sure our water and wastewater infrastructure in those two roadway segments will be where it needs to be. We've also got, so the design work for State Road 26 is underway in this current fiscal year. You've authorized us to hire consultants to begin working on the electric system design, the water system design, and the wastewater system design. We don't think that we'll be funding construction next year, next fiscal year. We should be wrapping up the design and then planning for construction in the future. FDOT currently knows they have funding in 27-28 for our project, but they expect to have funding much, much sooner. There's a big project out west of us called MCORS that was sucking up about $130 million a year from the state budget. That project got killed. So it's $130 million to be spread back out to other roadway projects in the state. And the state is also getting a lot of COVID funding, CARES funding, and there's a new infrastructure bill that's being put forward. So the DOT design team that is working on our project feels like they need to be shovel ready, ready to go in April, and that they would be then selected to move forward much sooner. We could see our project go to bid by the end of 22, and from what I'm hearing from DOT staff. Mr. Mayor, some 5 years ago, this commission authorized a road resurfacing program. We've been very diligent. We have a crackerjack team, but we have a guy named Jamie Jones that is hell-bent on getting every penny out of it he can, and so he cobbles money from wastewater, water expansion, road improvement, sidewalks, and swells, and puts them all together on one big project, and we end up with several projects in mostly in our south side neighborhoods, but that's just because they have the greatest need. We plan to continue that, and you'll recall that our local option fuel tax funding is set to increase at a rate of $25,000 a year. So we allocate those funds to that program with a goal of that we've been funded at $100,000 a year, but the commission had indicated previously that our goal was about $150,000. So as we get excess revenues, we're pointing them that way, and think that we're within 5 years of being able to reach the commission's goal. And we've been successful in not losing that local option fuel tax funding. It's been brought up for discussion a number of times, so we've been able to beat it back and stay in front of it. And I honestly think that now it's pretty much everybody's settled on that's the way it's going to be, and we're going to be safe. We have a lot of work going in our existing facilities. We've got some remodeling work going on at the Little Red Schoolhouse. East and Newberry Sports Complex project is associated with Wild Spaces, Public Places funding. And that's in design right now. We have a design consultant on board doing that work. It's not really taking a bunch of general fund dollars, but it is taking the lion's share of our Wild Spaces funding. City Hall expansion, we're in preliminary design. We have a couple workshops left, and then we're programming into next year's budget. We'll go into formal design. If it's a $3 million project, and I don't know exactly what it is, formal design is going to be 10 to 12%. So we're looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of $300,000, $250,000 to $300,000 to just for the design work next year, and that is fundable out of general fund reserves. That is fundable out of debt service. We can roll it all up into a debt service type program, but as you know, City Hall's been here 29 years. There's really not a crook or cranny in here that we don't have some staff person working at, and if we add any of the 4 positions that we're proposing, it's really gonna get cramped. Building a new city hall is a 3-year program minimum. If we add that three staff persons per year, and we're not proposing that, but if that's the number we grab, 9 new staff people, some of them would need to be at a city hall type building. We're getting cramped for space, so we think that it's incumbent upon the city to take some action moving forward, trying to create new office space as our demands on staff grow because our population increases.
Almost like that was well timed, Mike. Somebody was planning
Well
ahead.
timed. Mr. Mayor, under vehicles and equipment, some years ago, this commission asked that we start a vehicle replacement program. And at the time, we were trying to maybe buy 2 new vehicles a year. I think up to that point, we had not purchased a vehicle in 10 years, and our fleet was getting kind of obsolete. So we have done a really good job, but we're towards the tail end of looking at everything. We have 2 really extraordinary purchases that loom before the commission. One is for what we call a Quint. It's a fire apparatus, brand new fire apparatus like what we currently have is $800,000, which is roughly double what we spent on a fire engine just 3 years ago. But the Quint offers, it's a much more dynamic piece of fire apparatus. It gives us some flexibility that another engine wouldn't give us. Ben is going to be providing, Chief Buckner's going to be providing an overview of what that looks like, and we're going to be talking about it all budget season long, but what the pros and cons are, what our alternatives are, to give the commission, make sure they have all the information they need to make the decision that is best for our community. Bucket truck, an aerial truck for our electric utility. I'll just mention that the Quint would be funded out of general fund, and we have a BRF program that we've set up maybe 4 years ago that may not have all the reserves necessary for that, but at least softens the blow for any vehicles purchased out of our general fund. Yes.
Commissioner Farnsworth.
Mike, are we still getting money from the county for fire services?
Yes, sir. We do, and that we have a formula with them where that could change. I think our current funding levels are a shade over 200,000. Is that correct, or is it 180?
Mr. Mayor, the county provides the city $220,000 a year for fire services, and the city pays the county about $18,000 a year for fire services. So the net revenue to the city is about $200,000. It's based on the number of calls that the county answers in our territory and the number of calls our fire department answers in the county's territory.
Can that money be used to buy fire equipment, or is it used for certain things?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, yes, that money can be used to buy fire equipment. However, currently that money is allocated to pay for your ongoing fire department expenses.
Mr. Mayor, it's just not new money. If we use that money to pay for fire apparatus, we'd have to find a funding source to replace what it's currently funding. If you'll remember, I think 5 years ago, the funding level was $145,000 a year, and it had been that way for several years. We negotiated a new contract. And I would remind the commission that as we annex and grow, then the opportunity for the ratio of calls to slide to the city side would come up, which could therefore reduce those funding levels. Now, what we're annexing is purely ag. It's a long ways from heavily developed, so usually when we annex property, it doesn't have a density of call load that goes with it. But those are one of the things to remember if you're going to have pros and cons of annexation, is that in our trade-off with the county, every time we annex an acre of land, it means that potentially is a call that's going to end up on our side of the register and reduce our revenues from the county.
Commissioner Clark.
Mike, what is the 200,000 right now budgeted for? You say it's already expended. Are we talking the money that we budget and the 200,000?
It is, we budget the $200,000 revenue that we get from the county goes into our general fund revenues register, and it goes, and theoretically is funded straight into the fire department for operational expenses. I think our fire department budget is in the neighborhood of $1.5 million, and it's part of the makeup of $1.5 million.
Commissioner Farnsworth, I'm sorry, were you done with your questions? Okay. Other questions? I think
So-
you were left off with the bucket truck.
Yeah, so a Quint is an $800,000 piece of equipment. A bucket truck is a $250,000 piece of equipment. That's round numbers. We may end up paying $230 for it. The Quint is a 1998, so it's now pushing 23 years old. The fabrication time for a Quint is 15 months. So even if we order one on October the 1st, we won't spend a single dollar on it in the upcoming fiscal year. It'll be the subsequent fiscal year where we will receive it and make payment for it.
Mike, how much is an antique Quint? Can we sell it for?
Mr. Mayor, is Ben back there?
We have one of those before we got the curl.
So, Ben was telling us today that once a vehicle hits, in the fire industry, hits 10, 12 years old, that its value drops significantly, and probably the trade-in value on an apparatus that's 23 years old, 25.
But once it approaches 30 years old, it triples in value as an antique. Yeah.
Because we get to put a blue plate on the back. Is
Yeah.
that-
Yeah.
So a bucket truck, I think this is a '04 or '05 bucket truck. And we replaced a bucket truck about 4 years ago. Or we have two, well, really have three. Have two large ones that give us full height, so if we're working on a circuit, it's a safety thing. And then we have a short one, which is kind of a one-man job if he comes out and needs to close in a circuit at night or work on a street light. But our two big buckets were both old at the same time, and they just get unsafe. Things like the joints get worn, and so there's a lot of play, and when you're up around hot primary, 7,200 volt, and the bucket will sway, 18 inches, that's a bad feeling. And also the hydraulics will leak down, so when you get up in the bucket and you're working on something that's chest height, the hydraulics leak, and the next thing you know, you're working over your head, and you have to stop what you're doing and adjust the hydraulics to get yourself back up there. None of those are particularly safe. So normally, older bucket trucks get retired to tree trimming service, because we try to get every last bit of them out, and then we'll sell it to some tree trimming firm. But this bucket truck, we have pushed it back because we didn't want to buy on back-to-back years. 16 years old, we feel like that now it's a safety item for our staff if we don't give them the right type of equipment to work out of safely. There's some liability on us. So we are recommending purchase of that. It would be funded from electric system depreciation. So this commission, I don't know if any of you or all of you are sitting, but more than a decade ago, directed staff to begin having depreciation funds for their utilities. And so the cost for a new bucket truck is sitting in our depreciation fund because of wisdom of one of our previous commissions. Other things that will be capital improvements are workstations and IT infrastructure. That's a programmatic cost. You see this every year. We have enough workstations and computerized equipment in the city that I think our funding level is maybe $20,000 a year for that. We're doing a server. So server upgrades are usually a little bit more expensive. There'll probably be a few less desktop PCs, and when we focus in on a new server. And then parks and recreations, we just need to pay attention to maintaining our playground equipment and ensure it's safe for the people that are frequenting our parks.
Mike, let me pause you.
Sure.
Pause you there before we move on to expansion and enhancement. Any questions about any of these programs here? I had a couple, but go ahead, Mr. Commissioner Fleck.
Mayor, no, we had already talked about it, but the workstation, I've been into some of the offices and it looks like IKEA. Made a lot of money 20 years ago. And we do need some better desks to make some offices look very professional.
Agreed.
Kind of on that, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, kind of on that, the Little Red Schoolhouse, we've talked for quite some time about getting our offices on the bottom, getting our
Correct.
museums at the top. Is that a financial or is that operational, just prioritize? I know that department's been really busy with all the permitting lately and the CRA, but is that something this board needs to fund to reorganize that entire department?
It's not a funding issue, Mr. Mayor. I mean, it started out with that there were structural issues that needed to be addressed, and those were first. And we spent a fair amount of money and an immense amount of time redoing the foundations, dealing with an infestation by termites, and then structurally repairing the bricks that were in a state of fatigue. So we've done all the the envelope work, as Jamie says. We have a plan for moving forward. We have a cost estimate from our contractor. We are developing firm quotes to move that project forward. It got slowed again. We have a brand new building department from 6 months ago. Every employee in the building department is brand new. So getting them up to speed with their jobs, and then the building official is the project manager for this as well. So getting him acclimated to his new job and then transitioning into project manager role is still on our radar. It's very important for us. But I spoke earlier about some of our challenges aren't whether we can go do the daily work. It's some of the project work. This would be an example of a casualty both to COVID and to not having quite enough project manager type staff around, or transitioning from project manager staff to new project manager staff, and the learning curve that occurs when that happens.
And in our city hall expansion, one of those departments is coming over here, or is that will we end up with additional office space at Little Red Schoolhouse because some of those folks are going to move over here, and we'll be able to expand there as well?
Absolutely,
Is that the
Mr.
plan?
Mayor. The current direction that we understand from the commission is that all of our staff, we currently have codes enforcement, building, and planning at Little Red Schoolhouse. All of them are slated to be in City Hall. That's our understanding. Now, City Commission hasn't finalized that conceptual. That's what we're doing right now. But that's our thinking right now, is that that's the direction the City Commission has been directing us, is that we would move all those staff over here. And we believe we would end up with a museum. Currently have the schoolhouse museum would be over there, a very nice conference room both on the second floor, and then available office space on the first floor. If the commission says we want to put a visitor center in there, if we want to put Main Street in there, if we want to put a particular part of Tony over there, if we want the commission's offices to be over there, that's a decision that's to be made later. But for now, we're thinking that all of those department staff people will be moved into the new City Hall.
Okay. And then on Easton, the parking lot, paving the parking lot was a casualty of the fairgrounds. Correct?
Not
We
entirely.
lost paving the parking lot because we had to reallocate the wild spaces money to the fairgrounds. Or is that still on the docket?
It's still on the docket. I'd tell you, our big slowdown there has been getting the first step we had to do was get a design for a stormwater, master stormwater basin on the site. Required topographic mapping project, and I think the official project name that we've been able to identify that as the Project from Hell. We have been soliciting a topographic survey for now right at 15 months, and if we had gone conventional methods, would have eaten up almost all of our funding for the amount of project that we did topo surveys on. We would easily have been $150,000. We're going to be well below that, but we have run into a lot of contractors that are too busy to handle us. They make promises, and then 4 months later, there's no work been performed. But I did see a proposal come from from Travis, who's been overseeing that today, that we will have the final topo design within weeks. Stormwater engineer's been waiting patiently with the purchase order in hand. As soon as she's done, we're able to move on paving, sidewalks, and the multi-purpose field development. And I think we were supposed to design this fiscal year, so we're a little bit behind on the design, but our funding for construction was slated for next year. So we're currently not, there's a possibility we'll make that date, or we may be half a fiscal year behind on that project overall, but it's been a struggle.
Okay. Well, I'm glad my memory was wrong. I thought we had to nix the paving in order for that. So That's good.
The
Good news.
full paving at the facility, we would never be able to do. We had full paving roads all the way around
Yeah,
with multiple
just the
parking
parking
lots.
lot.
The main parking lot
Right.
next to the Easton Building, we anticipate that we're going to do.
Okay. And then
Mr. Mayor,
go ahead.
just according to our current Wild Spaces funding plan, we have parking lot improvements and construction starting in fiscal year 2023.
Okay. And then for the playground equipment, I think that as we keep an eye on upgrades and maintenance, I think we also need to make a dedicated effort to make sure that at least one of our playgrounds has special needs access playground equipment. I'm going around to other cities. This is becoming a standard
It is.
addition, and I think that needs to be something that we have our eye on as we upgrade that equipment, that we're also thinking about what are we bringing in for those kids.
That's a terrific idea. As you know, we've been working on master planning at each park. I think that, we should have a conversation, maybe in one of our workshops, or maybe just in a general commission meeting about if we're going to dedicate and commit resources to one part, where would the commission like to see it? We'll try to get it worked onto the master plan and develop a budget. To that end, we don't have any new playground equipment being slated for out of general fund dollars, but we do have the commission, when they adopted amendment to development order for Avalon, we are going to get up to, it's $35,000 or $40,000 worth of new playground, $40,000 worth of new playground equipment from that developer on our site. So if it's the Easton campus, we're certainly not too late in the game to try to make sure that equipment has a slant towards special needs, and that could be it if that's what the commission wants to do with it. It's a
Okay.
really good idea.
Any other thoughts? Move along, Mike. Expansion and enhancements.
Just expansion and enhancement programs. I don't want to say they're not significant. They are significant to us, but that's kind of the cream on the top of the cake when we recognize them as a lower priority to renewal and replacement. So the road paving program, the commission has asked us to look into a road paving program via grants, and we are because of our status with our last grant, we're not completely out of the woods to submit our next application. We think the application period is going to be next spring. We'll have an application ready to go. We will clear, we should be cleared from our grant here soon, in 2 months. So the next funding cycle that comes up, we're going to make application. That's about $1.3 million worth of road at last estimate. I plan to roll it out as a design build. Here's what the road should look like, here's the minimum specification, and here's where we want them. Here's what we want these roadways to look like. It's this many linear feet of road, give us a bid, and be just that simple. And we'll get credit in our grant application for having, bid ready, shovel ready project, ready to go to bid. So we're still working towards that at the commission's direction. The rest of road paving, and just to kind of circle back on that, we spent some time talking about paving our more rural roads. Generally, if you'll recall, we went out and did some testing to see the level of trips that are up and down these roads, and on average, we're seeing, from 200 to 300 trips a day on some of our rural unpaved roads. We did Southwest 30th, we did Southwest 15th, we did, I think we did Southwest 46th, which is paved currently. We did a lot of our rural roads to kind of establish a baseline. We compared them. We've done a lot of testing of Newberry Oak subdivision. If anybody remembers the days of us going out doing traffic counts there. So we know that those subdivisions are seeing, 1,500 to 2,000 trips per day, to give the commission kind of a magnitude or scale of the differences in level of service. I believe that those paving programs are so expensive that identifying development that wants to happen on those roads is key to us being able to get there. I can think on Southwest 30th, I know of 2 developments that we've had conversations with the developer in the last month about when they want to move forward with their projects, and they understand that paving 30th Avenue is going to be an onus on the development because they're going to generate so much traffic. 15th Avenue, which is chip sealed, the ARC developer told the commission, we understand that we're going to have to improve 15th, pave 15th from the eastern limits of our development all the way back to the school. Those are big dollars, and those developers are willing to take it on. I think there are some partnership opportunities, but taking on debt service to do rural roads, so far every time we've evaluated it, just really has exceeded our threshold for what affordability.
Mike, I just want to be clear though, because especially on the ARC and the 15th, because 15th is getting really bad. And there's a lot of people that are, they believe it's a Newberry Road. My understanding is a county road.
It is.
And that developer has said they understand they're going to have to pave it, but that developer has also been very clear that they have no intention of paving that road until their development has reached 15th, which is a 20-year build-out. So we're not talking, unless we're negotiating that saying, no, we need you to pave that road advance of you getting to 15th. There's no immediate plans to go there and pave that road from their development back.
There's no immediate plans, but I don't foresee it being in year 18. I think that the developer has indicated a need to get out the gate and start getting some revenues coming in, some cash flow. But I think by the time they're looking, if it's a 10-phase development, by the time they bring the 5th phase, then I think we're going to be having those conversations about, getting that extension through there and improving 15. So I think we're more on the 8 to 10 year time frame than the 20-year time frame. But we're keeping all options. The property between Newberry Town Center and 15th is ripe for development. There are some conversations. I wouldn't say they're formal. There's no way that staff would allow that development to come forward, or any proposed development on that property to come forward, without an improvement on that segment of 15. So we just try to be opportunists because we realize that's really the most cost-effective way to get these improvements, is to have a developer roll it into multi-million-dollar development versus us dealing with a $7 or $8 million general fund, 90% of which is already allocated to known expenses.
And I think we've had some robust conversation up here. I mean, 15th to me, that's a county road, so
It is.
it's really not in our purview anyway. But when we talk about trip counts, we've kind of gone from chip sealing to off of chip sealing, and one of my questions has been, what is I get a chip sealed road is a 10-year lifespan. 15th probably should have never been chip sealed because it has too many trips on it. But what is the trip count where if this road has this much traffic, chip seal is going to be more of a hassle than it's worth? But if it's under that, that's a viable option, and it's 30 years away from any potential development. That's not really on the horizon. What is that number? Have we ascertained if it's under 500 trips, chip seal is a good idea?
Well, Mr. Mayor, I'm entirely embarrassed to say I don't know, but I think that's a great question. And we have a great question answerer named Jamie Jones that will be back in the office Monday morning, and we're going to get on that. And I think that's a great benchmark for us to say that chip sealing is a candidate. If trips are below this, we think that chip sealing is not a candidate if the trip count exceeds Y.
To Mr. Tharp's comments earlier, I mean, I think certainly I could be wrong, and there could be a developer that comes out tomorrow and says, hey, I want to put 1,000 homes out there, and I'm willing to help share the cost of paving. But absent that, it's a long time before any big development's going to happen out there. Is chip sealing still 120,000 a mile roughly?
Last we've heard, the only entity that I know of in our part of Florida that chip seals is Alachua County. There's no private contractor that chip seals. They're it. And they don't chip seal that frequently. But the last time I spoke with them, we were in the 120, 125,000 per mile.
Because it seems to me it would be nice if we could set a goal of, we're gonna chip seal, we're gonna identify roads that are good candidates for chip sealing, because not all of them are, and we're gonna try to chip seal one of those roads every so often. Whether that's a 1 year, every other year, every third year, And that way we could say to people, because I think what we're really trying to do here is get a schedule so we can talk to our residents and say, yeah, actually your road is slated to be chip sealed in 2025. Your road is not. You know, your road is slated to be paved in 2028. I think that's what residents are asking for, and I think instead of doing it piecemeal when someone comes up with a complaint, us being proactive and saying, this is our schedule, this is what we're gonna do. This road only has 4 people on it, and we're gonna continue grading it, but we have no plans. This road is a really good contender for development, and we're waiting to see if a developer's gonna come in, so we're gonna continue grading it while we're looking for that. But having an argument, a reason, something that we could talk to people about, you know, and I know we're only funding our road resurfacing program right now at our loft level, correct?
Correct.
Which is about 150,000 a year,
We,
130,000
we're
a year,
probably,
80,000 a year.
no, we're north of that now.
I know we're gonna end up being 150 when the whole ship
But
happens.
some of our loft money moves into operations. Some loft money is earmarked for operation, and that's where it goes. Some of it is earmarked for capital.
Mr. Mayor, out of the 2 portions of the loft, you receive for fiscal year 2022, $122,000 that is dedicated solely to streets and roads expenses. And then you receive an additional $86,000 that is dedicated solely to streets and roads capital improvement. The commission has been funding $100,000 a year for street improvement. We've been making up the difference between the $86,000 and the $100,000 through your previously unspent gas tax reserves the commission had accumulated in the years past. As we continue to increase our loft receipts, we are getting to the point where we're not pulling out of reserves, and once we surpass that, we'll increase the budget amounts. I believe in next year's budget, we have a project funded that is less than the $100,000 for design of the next year's capital road improvement project.
Okay. All right.
So
Go ahead.
we can, to your point, we can develop that list. I think it entirely comes back to the commission's decision on how to fund it. If the timing. If the commission says it's all going to be funded 100% out of loft and general fund tax dollars with no assessment of the benefiting property owners, then our dollars don't go as far, and so the projects are once every 4 years. If the commission says no, we're going to get 50% of the money from general fund and from road tax, but the other 50% is going to come from an assessment or something else, then we double our speed and we can do project every 2 years, some of that nature. So we can put tags on what the estimated costs are. We will find what that trip count is where there's no value in our opinion to chip sealing, and then we can put a plan together that will stand with all the other plans that the commission has asked us to put together, so that that we're logically moving forward with the projects that the community would like to see us undertake.
And to be clear, we do have a schedule. We have a list of A, B, C roads. We can tell you what state your road is in.
Correct.
So in my mind, this is the next iteration
Correct.
of, now that we have that list, how are we addressing it? So,
Mr. Mayor, I'd also just point out for everyone's information edification, just this side of 170, just west of 170th, there's a little rural subdivision that goes with a road that goes down about a half a mile. And I came by there the other day, and the county was chip sealing that. So I called the county public works manager, and he said that they had got together, got it. The people that lived on that road did a little private assessment, 10-year assessment. They committed to paying for it on the taxes, and the county went further than I'd ever seen them go. They said, if you'll chip seal it, we'll take it over for ownership. And so the county is going to own that road. Got it chip sealed. 100% of the cost was borne by the residents, but the county will maintain it forever and ever. Residents will never have to spend an extra nickel on it for the county to maintain it. Thought it was interesting.
that is interesting.
Mr. Mayor, ain't that the same thing they did with 50?
maintain it?
No.
No, we maintain 15th, and we paid for a portion of 15th. And actually, when I say we paid for it, really the developer, Newberry Place developer, paid some money that the city then ponied up with some loft money, gave it to the county, and the county paid the, chip sealed the whole thing,
And then we have to maintain it?
and then we have to maintain it.
No wonder it's in the thing, state of disrepair.
Well,
It's-
Two new fire trucks,
it-
if we gotta go down that thing 3 or 4
It's-
times.
We will,
it's a new, it was a young iteration of
That's
chip
right.
seal, which wasn't very good.
it
It's
was,
bad.
Yeah.
it's not as good a chip seal. The one on 202 and 226, much better. The crews that do the chip sealing know better. They recognize the soils that are going to be problematic for them, and they go ahead and pull them out of there.
And 15th is a collector road. It really should have never been chip seal. It should have never been.
Once it's done, though.
Once it's done, it adds to the cost of going back and doing something else now. So the new chip seal technology becomes a step in paving. That chip seal technology, if you want to go in there and pave that road now and do something
Yeah,
else, you've got to
start
clean. Yeah, so it just added to the problem.
And and again, just so that the commission and the community is aware, our Public Works Department consists of 2 inmate crews, staffed at 10 apiece, and we haven't seen them in a year. We did have a very short period of time where we had them. We also have 4 Public Works employees, but 3 of those positions have been vacant now for the majority of 2021. So we're down to 1 person in Public Works, plus contract crews, if we can get them, to help us maintain all the facilities, all the parks, and all the roads in the city. So we are behind, and we, right now, Jamie's mode of operation is we're firefighting. Where the biggest, loudest fire is, that's what we're going to go and address. Loudest fire, the biggest fire, brightest fire. We're going to go address that with our 1 staff person. And I say that, I think we got 2 hired. 1 started this week, 1 starts next week, and the 3rd one is in the works. So we're trying to get staff back up, but it's been a slow process. We'll move on. And we're almost to the last slide, Mr. Mayor. The last slide that you haven't seen before. Mr. Mayor, as you know, the city of Newberry is slated to receive $2.6 million in 2 payments. We'll get 1 payment here in the next tranche. Okay. I call them payments. Dallas calls them tranches. But I think we'll get the first half of the money in the next 60 days, and then a year later we'll get the second half of the money. There are some restrictions on how that money can be spent. Dallas has way more expertise than me on that, but we have started developing a list of the things that the commission would consider, and we'd like to have the conversations as we go through the budget process, so as we come to the conclusion of budget process, we have some clarity on what the commission would like to do with that. The list of projects is in front of you there. I think you've heard of all of them. You see the one that says broadband fiber. I think that is probably mostly related to interconnectivity of city facilities, the fire department to city hall, the water plant, the wastewater plant, those types of things. We have really poor and slow broadband connectivity. I've presented to the commission probably on 2 occasions a plan, but we've always never made it high enough on the priority list. If that's eligible with ARPA money, the commission may say, yeah, let's throw some funding to get started on that or complete that. Next time you see this list, we'll have more dollar values over here on the side of what we think that looks like in terms of each expense, and maybe some ideas. If there's projects of interest, we'll start working on ways of ideas of potentially leveraging money. If the commission will go 25% funding on a project, can we get a grant that will do the other 75%? Ways that we could enhance our leveraging there. And then, Mr. Mayor, we are back to commission considerations, which is just a recap of a slide we saw earlier in the presentation. That takes us to questions, if the commission has any.
There you go. Okay, so, well, first, Mike, let me say, normally our very first kickoff session is much more 20,000-foot level. I think this was much more valuable way to begin the night, or begin this budget season. We've got some specific things to think about and consider, and we'll leave it right on that slide. And commission questions. Commissioner Clark.
So, drilling down then from the top, we're getting into it, so some things I want to at least to start thinking about in this budget cycle. And this don't mean necessarily I'm going to get anything, so I just want to say a few things. Number one is we need to get busy on putting a roof on that electric plant. I don't know what that cost is. I don't know how we can help get bids, what our rules are to get people just to look at it and give us a roofing bid, but regardless, I think we're going to do that or we're going to lose it.
Can we, I'll hold right there, Mark. I thought the roof was already budgeted. Is the roof's not budgeted?
It's on staff's radar. I don't know exactly, what Jamie already may have some budget estimates on that, but
Okay.
as soon as he's back to town, I'll find out where we are with that project, and I'll make sure it is identified as a priority.
I think that makes sure that before, that it gets included as a specific before this budget season is over, so that we
Absolutely.
can have that conversation. Continue on.
And I think we've all understand why that needs to be taken care of. Whether we
Absolutely.
rent that, future,
Agreed.
whatever's going on, we need to at least get some bones for that thing. I'd like to see possibly as a commissioner to do things a little better for some of the employees, and I've heard it mentioned, tuition assistance. If there is money in the budget for a small amount to help funding some tuition assistance, that would be good.
Absolutely.
And I'll leave it all that for now.
Other thoughts, questions? Commissioner Coleman? No?
For me right now, too late.
Okay. Seeing no questions. I think, and I didn't quite finish my thought. I was thanking staff for putting together such a comprehensive kickoff workshop tonight. I wanted to think about the way that we proceed. We've got 3 more budget workshops already lined up. We always have one. We'll do as many as the commission needs, obviously, but we always have one kind of lingering out there if necessary. It occurs to me that we have, semi-new and brand-new commissioners, and for the old commissioners, we've never done this as well. The possibility, all of these are sort of 20,000 foot level on big, broad ideas, and then we narrow down on specific questions. I think it might be beneficial, and we can certainly have a conversation about this as a board. If no one agrees, we'll just let it go. Every single budget year, we do a deep dive in one department, and we say, we want to educate you on this one department, commission, and we're going to go into a much more level of detail than we ever go into in the whole budget season. But we're not going to do that for every department every year, because I think it's too onerous to put it on the department heads. But we'll move through a department a year, or maybe 2 departments a year, whatever the staff thinks that they can handle. And that way we can really start to get an idea of how each department actually works from the inside. And if we added that, any thoughts, either from the dais or from staff? Commissioner Clark?
And when I first joined the dais, me and Mike had a conversation about how some budget items are put together. And we had a constituent that asked to see some of those things. So I'm all in agreement with that. For me, probably the building and planning as a whole, put that one together, and that way we see, I know there's some things they need, Mike. I know we're making money on, I know there's software needed. I know there's, case in point was furniture. There's different things. So for me, I'd like to see where like building and plan, do them one time, then break out each one annually.
The only time that I can remember doing a deep dive in an department was Parks and Rec. And that was back when we had Diamond and we had, there was like 2 or 3. And we went into each different sports and how much the sport was making and whether it was profit or loss, and Diamond, whether it was profit or loss and why it was profit or loss. And the value of doing that for me, I was a commissioner at that time, just to truly understand the inner workings. And then, that information fairly stays relevant for 3, 4, 5 years down the line before the world changes so much that those numbers are no longer kind of pertinent. But it would potentially be a way for us to not put too much burden on the department heads to say, I'm going to come here and I'm going to do, a 2-hour workshop on, and we have to sit through a bunch of those in each budget year, but to pick one. Building department, we all know we're building a lot of houses. We all know those revenues are greater than what they were expected, but what are the numbers? Any other thoughts besides Commissioner Clark? Commissioner Mazon?
Yeah. I agree with Clark. I feel that some of the departments, for instance, when was the last time anybody ever seen, I want to say, public records? Anybody ever visited that facility?
Oh, yeah, it's right there, you're right. I know you brand new, man.
I'm brand spanking new, but I've been visiting the facilities, and I feel that, honestly, I think going that route that Mayor Marlowe is saying, I think some of the facilities won't go untouched or get further behind. And I think when you go into some of these facilities, like I visited public records, and I saw how that was being ran, and I was shocked. To your point with the utility yard with Jones, I visited that plant, and they don't have a wash station out there. That shocked me.
What?
A wash station.
For vehicles? For what?
No, for their bodies.
Okay, a shower facility.
Shower facility.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
No, I understand.
Shower facility. So that I feel that stuff like that, when you don't go into further detail in certain departments, those things like that go unheard of and it gets missed. So, just to put that out there.
Mr. Mayor,
Mike?
I'd just offer a little bit of feedback, or at least for this budget year. In addition to the 4 budget workshops that we're developing, we have at least 2 City Hall workshops, City Hall expansion workshops. We have a public
Visioning
workshop
session.
to do with visioning. We have the Saturday community forum visioning. And Amy can maybe tell me there's another workshop. And 2 public hearings on the budget. Is there another workshop in the works? Okay, so it may just be those, but the putting together a deep dive doesn't just involve the department head. It will involve the finance director. It will involve the city manager, and it's great. We're happy to do it. I think the more our commission understands about the detail of our daily operation, the better we are as an operating unit. I think that we'd do a better job with the presentation if we can do the first one post-budget approval, do it in October, November. Any department you guys want to look at, we'll go through it A to Z, and then if you want to do that with each budget session, we'll plan that in to next year's workshop calendar, and we'll get there. I just think that we won't do as good a job as the task deserves, and I know that we have a full agenda. I'm worried about our full agenda now, and I think adding another workshop just makes me worry about it a little bit more. If the commission says I want to see it, we will make it happen. That's what we do.
I mean, I'm flexible, and I think that, we could certainly do it at any point in time. I think it's kind of a similar thing to what Commissioner Martin has asked for in terms of quarterly updates from department heads. This is a kind of a different iteration of that concept. I do want to just remind staff that we always have that one lingering, and I guess this is the appropriate time for me to make the annual speech about when we're in budget season, we have to have a balanced budget at the end of this process. So these are conversations. These workshops are our opportunity to say what we want and what we don't want. And sometimes commissioners are on the fence. They're conflicted about what we want to fund, what we don't want to fund. Do we want to institute a 4% utility tax? Do we not want to institute? Do we want to raise a mill? Do we want to do the rollback rate? All of those conversations are exactly why we have all these workshops. And so when we get to that 4th one, if we have disagreement, if it doesn't look like we've got 3 people that are coming together, We will need to have that fifth one, because what we cannot do is get to the second public hearing and someone say, well, you know, I just can't support this budget because it didn't include this project that I wanted, and now we don't have a past balanced budget. So this is not the time to keep things close to the vest. This is not the time to, you know, think I'm not going to ask that question yet. I'm going to shock and awe, surprise anybody later. These workshops are the time for us to say, I want to reduce the taxes. I want to raise the tax to provide this. That's what we're doing here and now for. So we've got 4. Hopefully we can get it done in 4. If my conversations with you guys lead me to think that that's in jeopardy, or your conversations with the manager lead him to think that that's in jeopardy, then we'll have a 5th so that we can we got to count to 3. And so that when we get to that second budget hearing, I don't have to, you know, ask Dallas to give us the apocalyptic rundown of what happens if we don't have a balanced budget on October 1 or September 1, October 1. So sometimes, you know, and that's why I give this speech every year. Now is the time to be having these conversations, not at the second meeting in September where you say, well, just can't do it because, you know, this didn't include, you know, this budget has a million different moving parts in it, and some of you are going to get the part that you want, and some of them it won't happen this year. So any further questions from the dais for staff? Public comment on anything that you've heard here tonight you'd like to address? You have to come on up, sir.
We gotta be up here.
Yeah.
On the fire engine and bucket truck, larger cities go through and get rid of equipment. I've seen them on websites, Georgia Gideon, which sells junk, but just an example of where they get rid of certainly newer than 1998 fire trucks and 2004 bucket trucks for fractions of a cool meal total of what you're talking about there. Is that an option?
I think that's a Jamie Jones question.
Because a lot of times they get rid of stuff that, you know, for a larger city would not be good, but for us may be feasible.
I had a conversation with the manager earlier today that I think he intends to roll out a proposal about our ability to purchase things that come up that are a good deal, but that exceed anyone's immediate spending level. And I think you're going to talk about that at the next budget workshop.
Correct. I mean, I think I heard that there's interest in us having a dump truck. We have a dump truck. It's reached the end of its useful life, or the near end of its useful life, and we believe we need it. We need a newer dump truck. Brand new dump truck is going to run us $150. We don't have $150,000 need. And Jamie feels like that they're available out there for significantly less, but they're available when they're available, and you don't have time to solicit 3 bids. We're buying used equipment, so we have a different purchasing process, but we need to see it and act on it. We had a really good opportunity to get a vibratory roller a few months ago that was for sale on the side of the highway here. It was in really good condition. We knew the maintenance history of it all, but it was somewhere in the $28,000 range, and it was probably worth $80,000. But it lasted about a week, and Jamie reiterated to me that in other organizations he's worked with, they've had the latitude. They earmark a little money in a spending level, and it's simply, if you get a really good deal, make it happen. Don't come back to the commission for anything like that, because it won't last that long. And he said, you know, we use it once every 3 or 4 years, but when we use it, it's a good deal for our community, and I think that would be something that we should consider. Staff will recommend that the commission give us that latitude.
So the answer to your question is yes. We're working on that.
Right, and I know they offer an inspection process. You could get somebody that's obviously qualified to go check it out and see if it is junk or whether it's good and you know, it's usable.
Usually our hands are frustratingly tied by state and federal regulations on that kind of stuff, but anytime we can, we absolutely take those options.
Okay.
And Mr. Mayor, to the issue of the Quint, at our next city commission meeting, that's not a joint meeting, so the first meeting in July, Chief Buckner is going to give a pretty extensive presentation on what alternatives are for that fire apparatus. So that includes new Quint, purchasing a used Quint, purchasing another, refurbishing our existing Quint, purchasing another apparatus. We don't have to have a Quint, but he's going to explain the pros and cons of replacing a Quint with a Quint or replacing a Quint with another engine, or why we would have two pieces of apparatus at all. So I think it'll be very comprehensive. There'll be a net present value analysis. If you buy a used piece of equipment, it won't last as long as a new piece of equipment is 10 years old. You assume they all have the same life. So, what's the net present value of purchasing a 10-year-old piece of equipment? We'll have that. It won't be a workshop. It'll be a city commission meeting, but we invite you to attend and give us your thoughts and input. I think the community has great ideas about things we could do to save our residents' tax dollars, and we'd appreciate the feedback.
If I could save you 500, you could do my road.
All right, that brings us to comments. Mr. Manager, do you have any comments for me?
Mr. Mayor, I have one, just a reminder to the commission and the community that this Saturday at 9 a.m. at Easton from 9 to 1, we are having a community forum related to community visioning. Invite the public to attend, give us their thoughts on where they want to see the community go, where they want Newberry to be in 10 years. That's all being compiled in a big report that will be presented to the commission. We'll get commission's thoughts on it at a subsequent workshop, and hopefully we'll come up with a guiding document that we'll be referring to every year during the budget process, that this is what the commission and the community have said we want to do. That'll be guiding our budget processes, and we'll repeat that as frequently as the commission says, every 5 to 10 years.
Okay.
That's RSVP, right?
That is RSVP. Thank you for reminding. It's not required. I mean, if you show up and you weren't on the list, we're not going to turn you away. But just in terms of planning for crowd size, there may be some donuts. We want to make sure everybody gets a donut. But we're also going to break out into small groups, and we kind of need to know how to plan for how much area and what the group sizes will be. So we're asking people to RSVP.
And on that note, that's an excellent opportunity and place to voice concerns about roadways, paving, those kinds of things as well, because that would lend that concern to the person who's doing our visioning. So if you can attend, that would be great as well. Madam Clerk? Thank you, ma'am. Commissioner Coleman? Commissioner Clark? Commissioner Farnsworth? Barden?
No, sir.
Commissioner Faison?
Yes, I have an important question. Are those donuts going to be Krispy Kreme?
Duncan.
Mr. Mayor, that really depends on the will of the commission. So as you know, we don't work for one elected official, but if we can get 3 votes for something, that's exactly what they'll be.
It's goldfish
Mike. Individually wrapped pretzels. The joint meeting on Monday, have we whittled down that agenda yet with the county commission? I know we had about 9 things on that.
Yes,
list.
Mr. Mayor, I don't, off the top of my head, I don't know, but we have got it pared down to something that we think is manageable.
And that's at Easton,
That is at Easton.
not here, 7 p.m. still?
7 p.m.
Okay, and we have no Board of Adjustment or anything after that, it's just the joint meeting?
Just the joint meeting.
Okay, all right, that's my only comment. Public comment? Hearing none, we are